Hey there, welcome back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The night my sister made lieutenant colonel, the house looked like a campaign headquarters. My father, retired General Robert Miller, had the place lit up like a recruiting commercial. Flag pins, crystal glasses, senior officers in dress blues, civilian contractors pretending they understood chain of command. My mother moved through the room like a public affairs officer correcting people on pronunciation and rank. And Sloane stood in the center of it all. Perfect uniform, perfect posture, perfect smile. She knew how to work a room. She always had. I stood near the dining room table holding a glass of sparkling water because I had a 0600 briefing the next morning. Major Audrey Miller, logistics technical analyst. Not flashy, not photogenic, not the family headline. But I built systems that kept battalions supplied in combat zones. I reduced waste by 18% across 2 commands. I redesigned a predictive supply model that cut emergency airlifts in half. None of that photographs well. Sloane tapped her fork against her glass. The room quieted immediately. I couldn't have done this without my team, she said, smiling wide. Especially the development of our new adaptive logistics framework. We're implementing a predictive resupply model that uses real-time data to anticipate shortages before they happen. My hand froze halfway to my mouth. Predictive resupply model, adaptive logistics framework. She kept talking. It's about modernizing our supply chain, smarter tracking, automated discrepancy flags, forward-positioned adjustments based on usage patterns. Those were my words. Not similar, not inspired by, mine. I wrote that framework 2 years ago. I briefed it at a closed logistics innovation panel. The slide deck had my name on it. The white paper had my digital signature. I'd sent a draft to Sloane once stupidly because she said she wanted to understand what I actually did. Across the room, she made eye contact with me. Just for a second, then she kept smiling. Applause filled the house. One of the colonels leaned toward me. Your sister's revolutionizing logistics. Impressive stuff, I nodded. Yeah, very impressive. My pulse slowed instead of racing. That's what happens when you've worked in logistics long enough. When something is off, you don't panic. You audit. I stepped outside to the back patio, where it was quieter. I pulled up my old files on my phone. Dates, timestamps, attachments. The original draft I emailed to her. Still there, still mine. When I walked back inside, Sloane was surrounded by 3 officers and a defense contractor. She was explaining my algorithm like she had coded it herself. I waited. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Then I touched her elbow. Can we talk privately, I asked. She smiled for the audience. Of course, little sis. We stepped into my father's study. The walls were covered in plaques and framed commendations, most of them his, a few of hers, none of mine. I closed the door. That predictive model you just presented, I said evenly. That's my framework. I sent you that draft 2 years ago. She didn't even blink. She adjusted her sleeve. You sent me a concept. I refined it. You lifted it. She laughed once. Short, controlled. You work in analysis. I work in command. Ideas don't matter until someone with authority executes them. It had my name on it. And now it doesn't. I stared at her. You used it for your promotion packet. She stepped closer. You weren't going to do anything with it, she said quietly. You sit behind a desk and run models. I actually lead people. I lead teams too. She tilted her head. You manage spreadsheets. I felt it then. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. You could have asked, I said. We could have built it together. She opened the study door before I could stop her. She didn't keep her voice down. She raised it. Oh my God, Audrey, she snapped loud enough for half the house to hear. You are not seriously trying to take credit for my work right now. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. She stepped into the center of the room. You're a staff officer, a desk analyst. Don't confuse drafting a memo with leading a modernization effort. I kept my voice level. It was my system. That's when she lost the mask. You are a book-smart office rat, she shouted. I am the face of this family. Don't you ever dream about making colonel. You don't have what it takes to stand next to me. Silence, real silence. 20 officers, 2 contractors, my parents, all watching. Have you ever been the most technically competent person in the room and still treated like you're just the assistant because you don't fit the image? If that's happened to you, tell me in the comments. I want to know how you handled it. My father cleared his throat first. Audrey, he said sharply, not tonight. My mother stepped forward. This is your sister's celebration. She stole my work, I said. Sloane folded her arms. Prove it, I almost laughed. Because I could, but that wasn't the point. My father's voice hardened. You're embarrassing yourself. She's embarrassing the uniform, I replied. Wrong choice. My mother grabbed my wrist. Apologize for what? For making a scene. She made it public. And you escalated it, my father said. You know how perception works in this institution? Yes, I did. Perception over data. Rank over substance. Image over integrity. Say you're proud of her, my mother whispered. Fix this. Sloane watched me like she already knew the outcome. I looked around the room, every officer calculating, every guest pretending not to stare. They weren't deciding who was right. They were deciding who was safer to align with. A newly promoted lieutenant colonel or a major in logistics. I'm not apologizing for something that's true, I said. My father's jaw tightened. Then you can leave, just like that. No discussion, no investigation, no private conversation later. Leave. Rain had started outside, hard, loud against the windows. I walked to the dining table where my service medals were displayed in a small shadow box my mother insisted on bringing out for appearances. One bronze star from a deployment where I ran supply recovery after a convoy loss. One commendation for efficiency reform. I opened the case. I took the bronze star out. And I set it on the table. I earned this without stealing from anyone, I said. No one answered. Sloane didn't look at the medal. She looked at the guests. I walked out the front door into the rain without waiting for anyone to follow. No one did. By the time I reached my car, my dress uniform was soaked through. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. You owe your sister an apology. Family is everything. I sat behind the steering wheel and stared at that message. Family is everything. I started the engine. And for the first time in my career, I made a decision that had nothing to do with strategy data or optics. I chose not to protect them anymore. I signed the transfer papers without arguing. Fort Halbrook sat in the middle of dry land and bad cell reception. Remote logistics hub. 2 warehouses, 1 aging motor pool. A command team that looked tired before 0800. Official reason for my reassignment. Operational realignment. Unofficial reason I embarrassed a lieutenant colonel with better media coverage than most brigades. My new commanding officer, Colonel Ramirez, shook my hand on day 1. We're short on budget and long on problems, he said. If you're as good as your file says, I need you yesterday. I prefer today, I replied. He almost smiled. Within a week, I saw the pattern. Our fuel allocation was reduced by 12% without explanation. 2 equipment upgrade requests were flagged and denied at higher headquarters. A training allocation we were promised got rerouted. Every denial traced back to the same approving authority. Lieutenant Colonel Sloane Miller. She wasn't in my direct chain of command, but she had oversight influence over modernization funds. Close enough to squeeze, far enough to deny. The cuts weren't random. They targeted the analytics unit. My unit. Colonel Ramirez called me into his office. Did you upset someone powerful? He asked plainly. Yes. He leaned back. Fix it. I don't fix politics, I said. I fix numbers, then fix the numbers so politics can't touch us. I went back to my office and pulled the last 6 months of budget modifications. I built a clean spreadsheet. Allocation, adjustment, approving authority, timestamp. The pattern was surgical. Small reductions, no headline-level sabotage. Just enough to slow performance metrics. It was a parasite tax. Not enough to kill the host, enough to weaken it. Then my personal finance alert came in. Unusual credit activity detected. I don't carry personal debt. I don't gamble. I don't invest in beachfront property. I logged into my credit monitoring account. There it was. A commercial loan guarantee attached to my name, 7 figures, backed under a limited liability real estate venture in Northern Virginia. Guarantor Audrey Miller. I stared at the screen. I had never signed that. The loan had defaulted. My credit score had dropped 80 points overnight. I requested the documentation immediately. The signature line had my name typed in. The digital authorization traced back to an IP address registered to a media consulting firm. The same firm Sloane used for her public relations management. She didn't just steal my work. She used my name as collateral. I called the lender. This is fraud, I said. The representative hesitated. Ma'am, the co-guarantor provided proper documentation. I did not sign anything. We'll initiate an internal review. Internal review. That usually means delay. 2 days later, the Inspector General's office notified Colonel Ramirez of an impending financial audit of our unit. Anonymous complaint alleging improper allocation of modernization funds. The audit window immediate. I walked into Ramirez's office with the email printed out. He read it once. Tell me this is coincidence. It's not. He studied my face. Are you compromised? No. Can you prove it? Yes. Then do it fast. Audits in the military are not gentle. They freeze spending, they question travel authorizations, they scrutinize fuel logs down to decimal points. If they found discrepancies, even minor ones, it would validate the complaint. And I knew who filed it. I didn't confront Sloan. That would have been emotional. Instead, I did what I've always done. I built a map. I pulled our entire financial trail for the last fiscal year. Every transaction, every approval chain, every override. I cross-referenced it against the denial memos that came from Sloan's office. Then I expanded the scope. I requested publicly available contract disclosures linked to her modernization initiative, the same initiative she claimed was built on her adaptive logistics framework. The vendor list caught my eye. One private defense contractor, small, aggressive growth, recently awarded a pilot program under Sloan's sponsorship. The contractor's board included a silent investor under a holding company. The holding company was tied to the same LLC listed on my fraudulent loan guarantee. I leaned back in my chair. She wasn't just protecting her image. She was funding it. Real estate losses, media consultants, lifestyle overhead, all propped up by public contracts and a stolen system she barely understood. And when the financial pressure hit, she used my name as a shield. The audit team arrived Monday morning, 2 officers, 1 civilian analyst. They asked for fuel reconciliation logs first. I handed them color-coded binders, digital backups on encrypted drives, access credentials prepared in advance. They looked almost disappointed. Major Miller, one of them, said, "We received an allegation that funds were misdirected under your supervision." "I'd like to see the allegation," I replied. "We can't disclose the source." "Then let's stick to data." For 3 days they combed through everything. No irregularities, no ghost allocations, no unexplained transfers. But on day 4, the civilian analyst paused. "Why was your predictive logistics pilot denied at higher headquarters?" she asked. "Ask the approving authority," I said. She made a note. That night, I sat alone in my office and reviewed the loan documents again. The authorization timestamp matched a night I was deployed on temporary duty. My CAC card had been logged into a secure network in another state at the same hour the loan was digitally signed. That wasn't sloppy. That was intentional. She assumed I wouldn't check. She assumed I'd panic. She assumed I'd try to negotiate. Instead, I compiled a timeline. Unauthorized financial guarantee. Contract awards benefiting linked entities. Budget suppression targeting my unit. Ambition is one thing, embezzlement is another. By the end of the audit, the inspectors cleared my unit officially. Colonel Ramirez called me in. They found nothing, he said. In fact, they commended your documentation. Good. But they're escalating questions about modernization approvals at higher headquarters. I nodded slowly. Sloan thought she was playing chess. She was playing checkers with someone who audits boards for fun. When I left Ramirez's office, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Her voice. "You're making noise," Sloan said calmly. "I'm doing my job. You always did take things personally. You forged my name." Silence. Then a soft laugh. "Careful with accusations, Audrey. That kind of instability doesn't look good on record." There it was, not denial, a warning. I ended the call without responding. I didn't feel anger this time. I felt focus. She wasn't just trying to discredit me. She was overextended, financially, politically, operationally. And overextended people make mistakes. I opened a new encrypted folder on my system, title Miller. Then I started documenting everything. Not to defend myself, to build a case. My phone lit up at 0540, from Mom. I already knew the tone before I opened it. "Audrey, this needs to stop. Sloan's evaluation board is in 6 weeks. If there are investigations or rumors circulating, it will damage her permanently. You need to consider resigning. At least request a temporary leave. Don't embarrass your sister." I read it twice. Not one word about the forged loan. Not one word about the audit. Just optics. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Then I wrote, "I'm not resigning." She responded within minutes. You're being selfish. This family has a legacy. Don't be the reason it collapses. Legacy. That word always showed up when they wanted compliance. The Miller legacy, my father's command reputation, my sister's rising star, our generational service. But something about that word bothered me more than usual. Because I'd been digging, not into Sloan this time, into us. Fort Halbrook had limited distractions and excellent archives access. I requested family records under public military history databases, old commendations, assignment histories, unit citations tied to my grandfather and great-grandfather. The narrative didn't line up. Decorations appeared in summaries but not in official award registries. Citations referenced operations that didn't match deployment logs. Names shifted slightly across documents. Small discrepancies. Too small for casual observers. Not small enough for me. I took leave for a weekend and drove back to my childhood home. My parents were at a charity gala with Sloan. The house was empty. I still had a key. The basement smelled like dust and sealed boxes. My mother never threw anything away. Old uniforms, framed photos, storage bins labeled by decade. In the far corner behind a stack of campaign memorabilia, I found a metal footlocker with my grandmother's initials, E.M. Evelyn Miller. She served during Wartime Logistics Command. The story we were told growing up was simple. She was brave. She supported supply operations. She married into a rising military family and helped build our network. That's the version we were given. The lock was old. It opened easily. Inside were letters, service records, and a small leather journal. I sat on the concrete floor and opened it. Her handwriting was tight, controlled. Entry after entry described supply diversions. Not theft for profit. Strategic redirection of resources to cover for a superior officer's failure. She documented falsified readiness reports, inflated performance metrics, quiet political trades. One line stopped me. Robert doesn't know the full truth about how his father secured that commendation. It wasn't earned. It was negotiated. And once you accept that, you spend the rest of your career protecting the lie. I read it again. Negotiated, not earned. Another entry years later. If the family continues to build rank on performance summaries instead of substance, someone will eventually collapse under the weight of it. I closed the journal slowly. The Miller legacy wasn't built on battlefield brilliance. It was built on image management, on smoothing reports, on controlling narratives. Sloan didn't invent the system, she perfected it. A car door slammed outside. I froze. Headlights flashed through the basement window. They weren't supposed to be home yet. I slid the journal back into the locker and closed it halfway, leaving it unlatched. Footsteps upstairs, then silence. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stepped toward the stairs but didn't answer. Then the basement door opened. Sloan stood at the top step. In civilian clothes, perfect posture even off duty. "You've always been curious," she said. I didn't respond. "You think digging through old boxes makes you righteous?" "I think facts matter." She walked down slowly. "Facts are controlled by people who know how to use them." "You mean like forging financial guarantees?" She smiled thinly. "You're obsessed." "I'm precise." Her eyes flicked toward the footlocker. "You're looking for dirt to justify your resentment." "I'm looking for truth." She stepped closer. "Truth doesn't protect you. Rank does. That's not what Grandma believed." Her jaw tightened. "So you found the journal, you knew about it?" "Of course I did." She moved past me and shut the locker fully. "Locked it. You think exposing old administrative compromises helps you?" she asked. "It destroys Dad. It destroys Mom. It destroys every introduction that ever opened a door for you." "I never asked for doors. That's the problem. You don't understand how this works." I held her gaze. "I understand exactly how it works." She walked upstairs without another word. I left 10 minutes later. The road out of town was wet from earlier rain. Streetlights reflected off the pavement. I replayed the journal entries in my head. Negotiated commendations, adjusted reports. Legacy built on managed perception. My phone vibrated again, this time from Mom. "Did you go into the basement?" I didn't answer. At the next intersection, headlights appeared fast in my rearview mirror. Too fast. The vehicle closed distance aggressively, high beams on. I shifted lanes. It followed. I accelerated slightly. It accelerated more. Then it clipped my rear bumper. Hard. My steering wheel jerked. Tires screeched. The car spun halfway before slamming into the guardrail. Airbags deployed. Silence. Then ringing. I checked myself quickly. No sharp pain, no broken limbs, just impact shock and a cut on my forehead. The other vehicle was gone. Gone. Within minutes, local police arrived. Then military police since I was active duty. At the hospital, I insisted on reviewing the intake notes. Mild concussion, stable vitals, no loss of consciousness documented. I signed the paperwork. 2 days later, my command received a medical update. The language had changed. Possible dissociative episode while driving. Reports of paranoia regarding family conflict. I stared at the screen in Colonel Ramirez's office. That's not what the original report said, I told him. He frowned. This came from the base medical system. I want the original. Will request it. My access to certain systems was temporarily restricted, pending medical review. Pending mental health evaluation. I sat in my office after hours and pulled the digital audit logs. Medical records had been accessed at 0213 the night after my discharge. The access credentials traced back to a senior administrative override. Authorized by a liaison office connected to Higher Headquarters Modernization Command. Sloan didn't need to hit my car herself. She just needed the narrative, an accident, a stressed officer, family conflict, instability. I leaned back in my chair and let the pattern settle. Financial fraud tied to my name, budget pressure on my unit. Anonymous audit complaint. Now a medical flag. This wasn't impulse. It was containment. She wasn't just protecting promotion packets anymore. She was building a case that I was incompetent. And incompetence discredits evidence before it's ever heard. I opened the encrypted folder labeled Miller and added a new subfolder, Medical. They took my badge at 0900, not permanently. Administrative suspension pending psychological evaluation. That was the phrase. My CAC card was deactivated for certain systems. My access to budget approvals was frozen. I was instructed not to report to my unit until cleared by behavioral health. Colonel Ramirez didn't look comfortable delivering the news. This isn't punitive, he said. It's procedural. It's strategic, I replied. He didn't argue. I packed a small bag and checked into the military medical center that afternoon. Evaluation period 72 hours minimum. Observation, interviews, standardized assessments. I cooperated with everything. Sleep patterns, stress indicators, cognitive tests. The psychiatrist, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, reviewed my intake file carefully. There's a note here suggesting possible paranoia related to family conflict, she said. Define paranoia, I replied. Persistent belief of targeted harm without substantiated evidence. I have substantiated evidence, I said calmly. Then provide it, I will, through proper channels. She studied me for a long moment. You're very controlled. That's my job. Control wasn't an act, it was survival. The first rule when dealing with a manipulator is simple. Don't feed them emotion, don't argue, don't defend unnecessarily. Become boring, become unresponsive, become a gray rock. That evening, while I was filling out a standardized stress inventory, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local military charity gala raises record donations for veteran housing initiative. The thumbnail photo loaded. Sloan in a black formal uniform, smiling beside a state senator, cameras angled perfectly. My parents flanking her like campaign staff. The caption read, Lieutenant Colonel Sloan Miller speaks about resilience and family unity during challenging times. I almost laughed. Family unity? An hour later, my mother texted, You should see what your sister is doing for the community tonight. This is leadership. I didn't respond. Gray rock. The next morning, I was escorted to a private consultation room. Sloan was waiting. Of course she was. She looked concerned. Soft expression, civilian blazer, no uniform this time. I had to pull strings to get in, she said gently. I sat down across from her. You're good at that. She ignored the comment. I'm worried about you, she said. This spiral isn't healthy. I'm stable. You were in a car accident. I was hit. According to the report, you lost focus. I held her gaze. No reaction. No visible irritation. That's not accurate. She leaned forward slightly. Audrey, this doesn't have to get worse. There it was, the offer. I can fix the loan situation, she continued. Completely. I'll pay it off. I'll clear your credit, quietly. With what money, I asked. She smiled faintly. That's not your concern. And in exchange, request voluntary separation from active duty. Medical discharge if necessary. Say you want a lower stress life. You're brilliant. You could consult privately. No one needs to know details. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a drafted statement. Voluntary career transition due to health prioritization. No admission of instability. No disciplinary language. Clean exit. You sign this, she said softly, and everything disappears. Debt. Audit noise. Tension. I didn't open the folder. You think I'm the problem, I said evenly. I think you're not built for politics. I'm built for integrity. She exhaled slowly as if disappointed. Integrity without power is self-sabotage. I let the silence stretch. Gray rock. No anger, no raised voice. Then I picked up the pen. Her eyes flickered with something close to relief. I signed the acknowledgement line at the bottom. Not the resignation. The acknowledgement that I received the proposal. Non-binding, procedural, meaningless legally, but it looked like agreement. She relaxed immediately. That's the smart choice, she said. I'm tired, I replied flatly. That's understandable. She stood up. I'll have my office coordinate the next steps. Thank you, I said. 2 simple words, completely neutral. When she left the room, I waited 30 seconds before opening the folder again. The actual resignation page required a secondary signature and formal submission through personnel command. None of that had happened. She assumed emotional collapse. She misread silence as surrender. That's the advantage of Gray Rock. People project what they want to see. Later that afternoon, Lieutenant Commander Hayes returned with preliminary findings. I see no clinical indicators of paranoia, she said. You present as highly analytical and guarded. That's not pathology. Will that be reflected in your report, I asked. Yes, but I'm curious. Why agree to meet your sister? I wanted to observe. And what did you observe that she's overconfident? Hayes almost smiled. That's not a diagnosis. No, it's a pattern. That evening, another news clip surfaced online. Sloan speaking at the gala podium. Leadership means carrying burdens so your family doesn't have to, she said, even when misunderstandings happen. A reporter asked, is it true your sister is facing mental health challenges? Sloan paused just long enough. My sister is going through a difficult time. We're supporting her privately. I won't comment further out of respect. The camera zoomed slightly. Sympathy angle, controlled narrative. I watched the clip twice. She never denied instability. She framed it. The next morning, my temporary suspension extended pending final evaluation clearance. Standard procedure. I didn't fight it. Instead, I requested copies of every medical access log tied to my file. Under patient rights, I was entitled to them. Time-stamped entries, user IDs, administrative overrides. One entry stood out. An external liaison authorization linked to Modernization Oversight Command. The same office connected to her funding approvals. I added the log to the Miller folder. Gray rock doesn't mean passive. It means controlled. When you stop reacting emotionally, the other person accelerates. They reveal more. They grow careless. Sloan thought she had neutralized me. Public narrative unstable sister. Compassionate leader. Family under stress. Private reality forged debt. Manipulated medical file. Budget interference. She was expanding her story, which meant she was increasing her exposure. On day 4, I was cleared for duty. No psychiatric diagnosis. No behavioral restriction. Official note, fit for continued service. Colonel Ramirez called personally. Welcome back, he said. There's movement at higher headquarters. Questions are being asked. About what I asked. Contract oversight. I hung up and looked at the signed acknowledgement form still in my possession. She thought I folded. She thought I chose comfort. She thought I was tired. I wasn't tired. I was patient. And patience in the military is a force multiplier. I unlocked my apartment door and stopped. The couch was gone. The framed deployment photo from Kandahar. Gone. Half my books. Gone. In their place sat 3 cardboard boxes stacked neatly by the wall. My name written in black marker, like I had been archived. I stepped inside slowly. Closets emptied. Kitchen stripped. Even the extra uniform jackets I kept pressed near the hallway rack were missing. I checked the lease file on my phone. Government quarters, assigned to Major Audrey Miller, active duty, no notice, no transfer order. My neighbor, Sergeant Klein, opened his door across the hall. Ma'am, he said carefully. I thought you knew. Knew what they said, housing reassignment? Lieutenant Colonel's office authorized it. Her assistant moved in this morning. Of course. I walked down the hall to the unit 2 doors over. The nameplate had already been replaced. Captain Laura Vance, Sloane's assistant. The door opened before I knocked. Vance stood there uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I was told." "You were told this unit was reassigned." "Yes, ma'am, I have paperwork." "From whom?" She hesitated. "Lieutenant Colonel Miller's office." I nodded once. "Keep your paperwork." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Gray rock. Instead, I went back into my half-empty apartment and opened my laptop. If she wanted to move pieces around physically, fine. I preferred digital terrain. Years ago, before Sloane became the family's public face, I set up our shared cloud storage system. My father wanted centralized access to family records, awards, investment documents. I built it, secured it, structured the permissions. They assumed I removed my admin privileges when I transferred units. I didn't. I logged in using an archived credential pathway I created for backup maintenance. The access still worked. Folders loaded, family investments, media contracts, modernization initiative. I opened the last one. There it was, draft proposals between Sloane and a private defense contractor, Orion Strategic Systems. Subject line, adaptive forward. Logistics pilot, phase 2 expansion. I downloaded the attachments, technical schematics, network integration diagrams, cost projections, and embedded in the infrastructure plan was a vulnerability I had flagged 2 years earlier in my original predictive model draft. They were bypassing multi-factor authentication for forward-deployed supply nodes to speed up real-time data sharing. That shortcut opened a backdoor. Anyone with moderate cyber capability could manipulate supply reports, create phantom shortages, trigger emergency resupply, redirect equipment. Not a minor flaw, a national security risk. I checked the comments section of the document. Sloane had written, risk minimal. Implementation priority outweighs concern. Proceed. Orion's lead engineer had replied, as long as oversight remains internal exposure, probability low, internal oversight, meaning her office. I leaned back and let the pattern settle. She stole my framework, cut safeguards to accelerate rollout, tied it to a contractor linked to her financial exposure, approved funding, suppressed questions, and now she had displaced me from my own quarters. That wasn't logistics. That was consolidation. I downloaded every file tied to Orion, archived emails, budget amendments, performance reviews. Then I did something simple. I ran the pilot system simulation using the flawed authentication protocol. Within minutes, I created a false fuel deficit in a simulated forward unit. The system flagged emergency resupply. The algorithm rerouted assets, all based on manipulated data. I documented every step, screenshots, timestamps, replication steps. Then I closed the admin portal. The next move wasn't confrontation, it was pressure. The following week, during a modernization coordination meeting at higher headquarters, Sloane presented Phase 2 rollout timelines. Halfway through her briefing, her secure device vibrated. She ignored it. 2 minutes later, it vibrated again. She glanced down briefly. Her expression shifted. The message was simple. Forward Node 7B, reporting inconsistent fuel metrics. Authentication variance detected. Recommend immediate review. No sender ID. I watched the live meeting feed remotely. She paused mid-sentence. "Excuse me," she said smoothly. "Minor technical note." She tried to pivot, but then a colonel in the room asked what variance. She hesitated. "I'll confirm offline," she replied. After the meeting, I sent another message. Node 12C, experiencing phantom shortage. Review access logs. Again anonymous, again precise. She couldn't ignore that one. Within days, her office initiated internal diagnostics on the pilot system. They didn't find an external breach. Because I wasn't breaching. I was using the vulnerability she approved. Every message referenced a real flaw, every alert reproducible. She began calling emergency sessions with Orion engineers. I accessed the meeting summaries through archived cloud sync. Concern expressed regarding exposure if authentication model scrutinized by external auditors. She replied in writing, "Keep this contained. No external escalation. Contained." That word again. Meanwhile, I filed a formal housing grievance through installation command. No accusations, just documentation, unauthorized reassignment, no transfer orders. The housing office responded within 48 hours. Clerical oversight, they claimed. The assistant was quietly relocated. My belongings were returned without apology. Sloan didn't contact me about it. She didn't need to. The message had been sent. You can move my furniture. I can move your system. 2 weeks later, during another briefing, she made a mistake. Under pressure from repeated technical anomalies, she dismissed the authentication concern publicly. Our analytics indicate the issue is user error at the node level, she said confidently. That statement contradicted internal Orion emails acknowledging structural vulnerability, and one of the officers in the room requested written confirmation. She provided it. In writing, user error. I archived the statement. Then I sent one final anonymous alert. Audit trail review recommended. Pattern suggests systemic override. No accusation, just suggestion. The next morning I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Major Miller, the voice asked. Yes, this is Captain Reynolds from the Office of the Judge Advocate General. We have a few questions regarding modernization pilot data integrity. I kept my voice steady. I'll cooperate fully. He paused. Off the record, someone's been very precise in highlighting concerns. I prefer precision, I replied. When the call ended, I reopened the Miller folder. New subfolder, Orion. Sloan wasn't panicking yet, but she was reacting. And reactive leaders make public statements they can't retract. Statements that don't match internal documents. Statements that investigators compare. She thought the anonymous alerts were a glitch, or a disgruntled analyst somewhere in the system. She didn't realize she was arguing with her own design flaw. And every time she minimized it publicly, she tightened the trap herself. I adjusted my service jacket and walked into the hearing room without looking at her. The setting was formal but not theatrical. Long table. 3 senior officers on the review panel. Recorder in the corner. Administrative clerk ready to log statements. Official purpose. Performance and conduct review of Major Audrey Miller following reported instability, audit complications, and intercommand conflict. Unofficial purpose. Neutralize me. Sloan sat 2 seats down in full dress uniform. Composed. Confident. She didn't look at me either. General Harrison entered 5 minutes later. Retired but still influential. Longtime ally of my father. Frequent speaker at modernization events. He shook Sloan's hand warmly before taking his seat as a character witness. I remained standing until instructed otherwise. Major Miller, the panel chair, began. This review will assess whether recent events have impacted your suitability for continued command-level analytical responsibilities. I understand, I said. Sloan requested permission to speak early. Major Miller has demonstrated increasingly erratic behavior, she began smoothly. Unfounded accusations. Disruptive escalation of routine oversight, emotional instability following a vehicle incident. Her tone was calm, clinical. She handed the panel a packet. Curated emails, isolated messages, framed context, selective storytelling. General Harrison cleared his throat. I've observed Lieutenant Colonel Miller's professionalism under intense pressure, he said. Family conflict can distort perception. We must protect command integrity. Protect command integrity, that phrase gets used when someone wants to bury something quietly. The chair turned to me. Major Miller, do you dispute the characterization presented? Yes, I said. On what grounds? Data. Sloan didn't react. I placed a thin folder on the table in front of me. I didn't open it, not yet. Major, the chair continued. Are you alleging misconduct within modernization oversight? I am alleging structural vulnerabilities that were dismissed despite documented warnings. I replied evenly. Sloan leaned forward slightly. This is what I mean. She reframes routine disagreements as systemic corruption. I didn't respond to her. Grey Rock wasn't needed anymore. This was timing. The door at the back of the room opened, not loudly, but enough to shift attention. A captain entered in standard JAG uniform, carrying a thick binder and a digital evidence case. He walked directly to the panel and handed over formal documentation. Captain Daniel Reynolds, Judge Advocate General's Corps, he stated, requesting inclusion in this proceeding under authority of an ongoing procurement integrity investigation. The air changed immediately. Sloan's posture stiffened. The panel chair frowned. Investigation into whom Reynolds placed the binder on the table. Lieutenant Colonel Sloan Miller. Silence. Real silence. General Harrison looked between them sharply. There must be some misunderstanding. Reynolds didn't raise his voice. No misunderstanding, sir. He opened the binder, tab after tab. Contract communications between Sloan's office and Orion Strategic Systems. Financial cross-links between Orion board members and a real estate holding company. Loan guarantee documents listing my name. Medical access override logs tied to modernization liaison credentials. Every piece authenticated, time-stamped, digitally verified. The chair turned slowly toward Sloan. Lieutenant Colonel, her face remained controlled. "This is absurd," she said calmly. "Anonymous allegations compiled without context." Reynolds spoke again. "Not anonymous, documented." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Additionally, we have recorded briefings where known system vulnerabilities were publicly dismissed despite internal acknowledgement of risk." General Harrison leaned forward. "Captain, are you accusing a field-grade officer of fraud? I am presenting evidence of procurement misconduct, misuse of authority, and potential financial fraud." Sloan's eyes flicked toward me for the first time. Sharp, not angry, calculating. "How did you obtain internal communications?" she asked. Reynolds answered before I could. "Through authorized whistleblower submission under protected disclosure statutes. Protected, legal, untouchable." The chair looked at me. "Major Miller." "Were you involved in the submission?" "Yes," I said. Sloan's voice cut in. "So this entire hearing was engineered?" "No," Reynolds replied evenly. "The hearing was requested by your office. We expedited inclusion once the timeline aligned." That was true. She scheduled the hearing assuming control. She didn't expect synchronization. Reynolds turned another page. "Furthermore, we have evidence suggesting deliberate alteration of medical records to influence command perception." General Harrison sat back slowly. "This is a serious claim," he said. "It is," Reynolds agreed. Sloan's composure thinned slightly. "Administrative errors happen," she said. "That does not imply intent." Reynolds met her gaze. "Intent becomes clear when errors consistently benefit one individual." I remained silent. Not defensive, not triumphant. Still, the panel chair closed the binder halfway. "Lieutenant Colonel Miller," he said carefully. "Pending full investigation. You are relieved of modernization oversight responsibilities, effective immediately." The words landed heavily, not shouted, not dramatic, official. Sloan didn't protest. That would have looked desperate. Instead, she stood slowly. "I will cooperate fully," she said. Reynolds added one more sentence. "As will all parties connected to Orion Strategic Systems." That included the board. That included the holding company. That included the loan tied to my name. The hearing was no longer about my mental stability. It was about her financial stability. General Harrison avoided my eyes. The panel adjourned temporarily. As officers filed out, Reynolds remained. He waited until the room cleared before speaking to me directly. "You timed it well," he said quietly. "I documented it well," I replied. He gave a small nod. Daniel Reynolds wasn't random. 4 years ago, during a deployment logistics recovery operation, I flagged a contractor billing anomaly that protected his unit from supply manipulation. We kept professional contact. When Orion's name surfaced in my audit trail, I didn't call him emotionally. I sent him structured evidence. Over 4 years, piece by piece, careful, precise. He closed the binder. "She thought she controlled narrative flow," he said. "She controlled visibility," I replied. "Not structure." When Sloan exited the building, cameras were already outside. Not because I called them, because procurement investigations at that level trigger reporting. She walked past reporters without answering questions. For the first time, she wasn't leading the story. She was reacting to it. And reaction in her world was weakness. I left the building through the side entrance. No cameras, no applause, just clear air. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I ignored it. For years she told me rank was power. Today proved something else. Documentation is power. And power backed by law doesn't need to shout. I pressed my uniform one more time before sunrise. Not because it needed it. Because I did. The formal Article 15 level hearing wasn't about my fitness anymore. It was about procurement misconduct, abuse of authority, and interference with medical records. Sloan requested the session be expanded and made formal. She wanted a stage. She thought she could outmaneuver the paperwork. When I entered the auditorium-style hearing room, there were more seats filled than before. Senior officers, legal staff, a few media observers in the back row. No cameras allowed, but notes would travel. Sloan stood at the defense table with civilian counsel beside her. She looked steady, polished, like always. The panel chair called the session to order. Lieutenant Colonel Miller, he began. You've submitted a formal rebuttal to the procurement allegations. Yes, sir, she replied clearly. The supposed vulnerabilities were system glitches, technical misinterpretations by personnel without full operational scope. She didn't look at me. Furthermore, she continued, the anonymous data. Submissions appear manipulated, selectively compiled to imply intent where none exists. Her counsel slid forward a packet. Digital files can be altered, he added. Chain of custody matters. Reynolds sat at the opposite table, expression neutral. Sloan pivoted smoothly. And regarding the medical concerns raised previously, she said Major Miller has demonstrated fixation and hostility tied to personal grievances. There it was, not unstable, hostile, strategic shift. The chair turned toward me. Major Miller, you may respond. I stood, not rushed, not defensive. I wasn't wearing hospital scrubs. I wasn't on suspension. I was in full service dress, back straight, shoulders squared. I will respond with evidence, I said. I placed a small digital recorder on the table. Sloane's eyes narrowed slightly. Reynolds glanced at it once, then back at the panel. This recording, I said evenly, was made during a conversation between myself and Lieutenant Colonel Miller in a private consultation room at the Military Medical Center. Her counsel leaned forward. Was consent obtained? Yes, I replied calmly. The jurisdiction permits one-party consent for recordings. I was present. The chair nodded once. Proceed. I pressed play. Static for half a second, then her voice. Clear. I can fix the loan situation, completely. I'll pay it off. Quietly, my own voice followed. With what money? That's not your concern. Paper shifted around the table. The recording continued. You sign this and everything disappears. Debt, audit noise, tension, then the line that mattered. Integrity without power is self-sabotage. The room remained silent. Then came the part she forgot. The part she thought was off the record. You think I'm the problem, I had said. I think you're not built for politics. And the accident, I asked in the recording. Pause. Her voice lowered. Don't dramatize it. You were already unstable. Were medical notes adjusted? Another pause. Language was clarified. For your own good. I stopped the recording. No shouting, no explosion, just her voice. Calm, controlled, damning. Her counsel stood immediately. This proves nothing about intent. Reynolds didn't move. It proves knowledge. The chair looked directly at Sloan. Lieutenant Colonel, did you access or authorize access to medical records outside normal scope? She didn't answer immediately. For the first time, she hesitated. I coordinated with liaison staff, she said carefully. Concerns were raised. Concerns you initiated, the chair asked. I acted in the interest of command stability. There it was again, command stability. Everything framed as protection, never control. Reynolds slid forward another document. Access logs confirm a direct authorization trail from Modernization Oversight Liaison. Credentials to Medical Administrative Override. Sloane's counsel whispered something urgently. She straightened. This entire situation stems from a technical systems dispute, she said, voice tightening slightly. Major Miller couldn't accept strategic adjustments to her framework. I met her eyes for the first time that morning. You mean removing authentication safeguards? I asked. That decision was operationally sound. It created exploitable backdoors. It accelerated efficiency, at the cost of security. She exhaled sharply. You always focus on theoretical risks. I focus on documented ones. The chair raised a hand. Enough. He looked down at the binder in front of him. Lieutenant Colonel Miller, we are not evaluating philosophical differences. We are evaluating documented procurement decisions, financial crosslinks, and potential interference with medical records. General Harrison was present again, seated behind her. He looked older today, quieter. The arrogance trap isn't loud, it's subtle. You let someone believe they're smarter. You let them over-explain. You let them double down publicly. She had dismissed vulnerabilities in writing. She had framed me as unstable on record. She had authorized record adjustments, all under the assumption that rank insulated her. It doesn't. Rank amplifies consequences. Reynolds spoke again. We also have financial documentation linking the defaulted real estate venture to a holding company benefiting from Orion's Phase 2 contract. The panel members exchanged brief glances. Sloane's composure cracked just slightly. That is circumstantial, it's financial, Reynolds replied. The chair turned back to me. Major Miller, you've been accused of hostility and destabilization. Do you wish to address that? I nodded once. Yes, sir, I stepped forward half a pace. Hostility is emotional, documentation is procedural. I documented vulnerabilities, I documented financial irregularities, I documented unauthorized medical access. I paused deliberately. Power does not reside in rank alone. It resides in the truth that rank is supposed to protect. No one interrupted. Sloane's jaw tightened. She understood the shift. The narrative wasn't sister versus sister anymore. It was officer versus evidence. The chair closed the folder slowly. Lieutenant Colonel Miller, pending full resolution, you are suspended from command authority and restricted from oversight functions. Not relieved permanently. Yet. But stripped of leverage. The session adjourned. Officers stood. Chairs moved quietly. No applause. No dramatic exits. Just administrative gravity. As I gathered my materials, Sloane stepped closer. Low voice. You think this makes you righteous? I replied. It makes me accurate. She leaned in slightly. You'll lose the family over this. I already did, I said calmly. That hit. Not visibly, but it landed. She walked out without another word. Outside the building, reporters waited again. This time the questions were sharper. Lieutenant Colonel, did you manipulate procurement oversight? Is there a conflict of interest with Orion? Did you interfere in your sister's medical evaluation? She didn't answer. For once, silence wasn't strategy. It was containment. I walked past the cameras unnoticed. That was fine. Respect doesn't trend. It accumulates. Back in my office, I reopened the Miller folder. 4 years of documentation. 4 years of restraint. 4 years of letting her believe she was untouchable. Arrogance isn't loud confidence. It's the belief that no one else is patient enough to outlast you. She miscalculated one thing. I don't need to outshine anyone. I just need to out-document them. And documentation doesn't argue, it waits. I was in my office reviewing quarterly supply forecasts when the first headline dropped. Not civilian media, military press. Procurement oversight under review in modernization program. It didn't mention Sloane by name yet, but everyone inside the system knew who chaired that program. By noon, a second article surfaced. Conflict of interest questions surround Phase 2 logistics contract. That one included a timeline. Dates aligned. Budget approvals, oversight signatures. Her name was in the middle of it. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt inevitability. When systems collapse, they don't explode. They unravel. Colonel Ramirez stepped into my office without knocking. They're circling, he said. I know. Higher headquarters is distancing fast. Of course they were. Institutions protect themselves before they protect individuals. By 1600, I received confirmation through internal channels. Lieutenant Colonel Sloane Miller was formally relieved of command authority pending full investigation. Relieved. That word carries weight. It means you don't brief. You don't sign. You don't speak for the unit. You sit and wait. That evening, my phone rang. Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. Audrey, he said, voice tight. This has gone too far. No, I replied calmly. It's gone public. You filed protected disclosures. I submitted documented evidence. You could have handled this internally. I tried. Silence. Then Mom's voice came faintly in the background. Put me on, he did. Audrey, she said, already emotional. Family is everything. You can't destroy your sister like this. Destroy. Interesting choice. I didn't destroy anything, I said. Documentation did. She made mistakes, Mom insisted. Everyone makes mistakes. Forgery isn't a mistake. She was under pressure. So was I. Dad took the phone back. You need to withdraw your statements, he said firmly. Publicly clarify that there was a misunderstanding. There wasn't. You're humiliating us. There it was, not concern for legality, not concern for ethics. Humiliation. Who is us, I asked. Our family. No, I said evenly. Your image. His breathing changed slightly. You think this makes you noble, he snapped. You think burning bridges earns respect. Respect isn't earned by silence, I replied. Mom's voice broke in again. Please, Audrey. She's your sister. She stopped being that when she forged my name. She'll lose everything. She chose that risk. There was a long pause, then the final card. If this continues, Dad said, voice colder. Now don't expect to walk back into this family. I looked around my office. Maps on the wall, supply flow charts, my unit's readiness metrics. People who trusted my analysis because it was accurate. I'm not walking back, I said. Silence. Then the line disconnected. The next day, internal investigation updates leaked to military media. Anonymous sources cited patterned misuse of authority. Procurement ethics panels convened. Orion Strategic Systems stock dipped. Board members resigned quietly. Damage control mode. I learned through channels that my parents had hired a private attorney to explore defamation angles. Defamation. Against documented audit trails. Desperation looks expensive. 2 days later, I received a direct call from Sloan. No block number, no intermediaries, just her. You win, she said flatly. This isn't a competition, I replied. It always was. No, it was accountability. She exhaled sharply. You've always been jealous. Of what visibility? I don't need cameras. She laughed once. Bitter. You think they'll promote you for this? I don't care. That's the difference, she said quietly. I cared. And that's the problem. There was a pause. They're going to make me the example, she said. They're going to follow the evidence. You could have talked to me. I did. You recorded me. You admitted it. Silence again. Then softer. Do you understand what this does to Mom? Yes. And you're fine with that. I'm fine with not lying. She didn't respond. After a few seconds, the line went dead. Later that week, official notice circulated. Lieutenant Colonel Sloan Miller stripped of command authority pending final adjudication. Administrative action initiated. That's bureaucratic language for career freefall. General Harrison issued a short statement distancing himself from oversight decisions. My father stopped answering calls from certain colleagues. Invitations to charity boards quietly disappeared. The Miller name, once currency, became caution. Mom left one final voicemail. We built this family from nothing, she said through tears. You could have protected it. I listened to it once, then deleted it. That night I sat alone in my apartment. No boxes this time, no missing furniture, just quiet. I thought about my grandmother's journal, negotiated commendations, managed narratives, legacy built on perception. It finally made sense. They weren't protecting each other, they were protecting the story. And I had interrupted it. The next morning, Dad showed up outside my building. No call, no appointment. He looked older, smaller somehow. Is there any way to contain this, he asked. No, I said. Reputation takes decades to build. So does integrity. He looked at me long and hard. You're cutting us off over paperwork. I'm drawing a boundary over fraud. He shook his head. You're choosing the institution over blood. I met his eyes. No, I said calmly. You chose image over truth. He didn't argue. He couldn't. From today, I continued evenly. I have teammates. I don't have family. The words weren't dramatic, they were precise. He stood there for a moment longer, then he left. No threats this time. No ultimatums. Just distance. Inside the building, Sergeant Klein passed me in the hallway. Ma'am, he said quietly. We've got your back. I nodded once. That was enough. You don't need a last name when your work speaks. And you don't need a legacy when your record is clean. The Miller Empire wasn't destroyed by me. It collapsed under the weight of its own shortcuts. And shortcuts always collect interest. 4 years is enough time for noise to fade. It's not enough time for records to disappear. I stood in the hallway outside the auditorium, adjusting the silver eagle on my shoulder boards. Colonel. The word still felt technical, earned, not inherited. The ceremony was simple. No political theater, no charity banners, just officers, enlisted representatives, and a clean podium with the unit insignia behind it. My name sat printed on the program. Colonel Audrey Miller, Logistics Command, the same field Sloan once called spreadsheet management. Colonel Ramirez, now Brigadier General Ramirez, approached me with a small smile. You ready? He asked. I've been ready, I replied. He nodded once and stepped toward the stage. The auditorium filled quickly, rows of uniforms, a few civilian analysts, several officers from units I had supported over the last 4 years, Supply Recovery Task Force, Cyber Audit Integration Team, Forward Deployment Optimization Cell. I recognized faces, people who didn't care about last names, people who cared about whether equipment arrived on time and data was accurate. The Master of Ceremonies called the room to attention, then my name, Major, pardon me, Colonel Audrey Miller. I walked forward at measured pace. No rush, no hesitation. Brigadier General Ramirez read the citation. Colonel Miller's leadership in restructuring forward logistics authentication protocols reduced security vulnerabilities by 37% across 3 operational theaters. That line mattered. Authentication protocols. The safeguard Sloan cut. Her oversight during procurement integrity reform restored transparency and saved the department significant projected losses. No adjectives, just numbers, he continued. Her mentorship of junior officers and cross-branch coordination strengthened operational readiness without compromise to accountability. I stood still while he pinned the rank insignia properly in place. Applause followed, standard, respectful. Then something shifted. As I turned to face the room, one officer in the second row stood. Full colonel, then another, and another. Within seconds, 22 senior officers were on their feet, not clapping, standing at attention. Right hands raised in formal salute, 22. I recognized almost every one of them. Colonel Hayes, who once had her budget cut under Sloan's restructuring. Colonel Donovan, whose cybersecurity warnings were dismissed as overcautious. Colonel Mitchell, who lost a contract bid because he refused to smooth performance data. And others. Officers I had helped quietly over the years. Reviewed their documentation. Validated their concerns. Protected their units with clean analysis. They weren't saluting rank. They were saluting record. The rest of the room followed instinctively, but the first 22 mattered. Salutes in the military aren't casual, they're deliberate, they are recognition. I returned the salute slowly, then lowered my hand. The room settled back into their seats. Brigadier General Ramirez leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "That doesn't happen often." "I know," I said quietly. After the formal remarks, I stepped to the podium. No dramatic speech prepared. No emotional narrative. I didn't build my career on being visible, I began. I built it on being accurate. A few quiet nods across the room. Logistics isn't glamorous. It's discipline. It's documentation. It's accountability when shortcuts are tempting. I paused. Rank is not insulation. It's responsibility. Silence. Focused. And the only authority worth holding is the kind that protects truth, even when it's inconvenient. I didn't mention Sloan. I didn't need to. Everyone in that room understood the reference. Applause followed, controlled, respectful. As the ceremony ended, officers approached one by one, handshake. Short congratulations, no exaggeration. Colonel Hayes leaned in slightly. 4 years ago you warned them. Yes, I replied. They're finally listening. They're finally auditing, I corrected. Outside the auditorium, reporters waited. Military press this time. Professional. Questions about procurement reform. Cybersecurity safeguards. Leadership philosophy. No one asked about family. That chapter had closed publicly. As I stepped outside for photos, I noticed a small crowd beyond the secured perimeter fence. Civilians, onlookers, a few former colleagues, and there she was. Not in uniform, not near the entrance. Standing behind the barrier with a freelance reporter holding a camera lens. Sloan. She looked smaller, not physically, positionally. The reporter angled the camera toward the stage, not toward her. She wasn't the subject anymore. She watched as officers shook my hand. Watched as enlisted soldiers saluted me in passing. Watched the 22 colonels gather near the front steps for a group photo. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. No anger, no challenge, just recognition. Fame is loud, respect is quiet. She spent years mastering the first. I spent years earning the second. The reporter asked her something. She shook her head slightly. There was nothing to comment on, no narrative to spin, no charity gala to host, just consequence. As the crowd began to disperse, Brigadier General Ramirez stepped beside me again. "You've rewritten more than policy," he said. "I corrected it," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Enjoy the rank. I will." That evening, alone in my office, I placed the new insignia case beside the old bronze star I once left on a dining table in the rain. I never picked that one back up. I didn't need to. I earned this one without asking permission. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if someone told you that you didn't belong at their level, comment self-respect below. Don't let someone else's shouting define your ceiling. And if this story reminded you that integrity outlasts image, subscribe. There are more truths worth documenting. 4 years ago, I thought I lost my family. Now I understand something different. I didn't lose a family. I walked away from a power structure. There's a difference. When I was younger, I believed family meant safety. It meant loyalty. It meant automatic protection. That's what we're taught. Blood over everything. Last name over disagreement. Close ranks when someone outside questions you. But some families don't operate on love. They operate on hierarchy. Who brings status? Who protects the image? Who keeps the story intact? In my family, rank wasn't just professional. It was personal. My father's stars mattered at the dinner table. Sloane's promotions shifted the temperature in the room. Every achievement became leverage. Every public success became currency. And if you threatened the currency, you threatened the structure. That's why my mother didn't ask whether the loan was forged. She asked whether I could keep this quiet. That's why my father didn't investigate procurement documents. He asked whether I understood what this does to our name. When image becomes more important than truth, you're not in a family anymore. You're in a brand. And brands don't tolerate internal whistleblowers. They remove them. Looking back, the signs were always there. First sign, image over integrity. If something uncomfortable happens, do they ask what's true, or do they ask how it looks? When I confronted Sloane about stealing my logistics framework, the room didn't freeze because they doubted her. It froze because I disrupted optics. The problem wasn't theft. The problem was timing. If your honesty is treated like sabotage, you're not in a safe system. Second sign. The scapegoat mechanism. Every power structure needs balance. If one person is elevated as the golden child, someone else quietly absorbs blame. I was the analyst, the quiet one, the not political one. That label made it easier to frame me as unstable later. When Sloane called me erratic, the story fit a pre-existing narrative. Book smart, not socially skilled, too intense. Scapegoating works best when it builds slowly over years. If you've ever been told you're too sensitive every time you point out something wrong, that's not personality feedback. That's conditioning. Third sign, conditional support. Real support doesn't disappear when you make someone uncomfortable. Conditional support does. The moment I stopped protecting the family image, support evaporated. Not gradually, immediately. If love is withdrawn the second you refuse to lie, that wasn't love. It was compliance disguised as loyalty. Here's the hard truth most people avoid. You can love your family and still recognize that the system they operate in is unhealthy. And sometimes the only way to stop participating in dysfunction is to step outside of it. That doesn't mean screaming. It doesn't mean revenge. It means documentation. It means boundaries. It means refusing to negotiate with manipulation. In the military, we talk about chain of command. At home, there's often an invisible chain too. Who has authority? Who decides what's acceptable? Who gets protected when things go wrong? If that chain consistently favors one person, regardless of facts, you're not dealing with fairness. You're dealing with hierarchy. Here's what I did differently once I understood that. I stopped arguing emotionally. I stopped trying to make them understand. People inside a power structure don't misunderstand you. They understand you perfectly. They just prioritize stability over justice. So instead of fighting for validation, I fought for clarity. I wrote everything down. I saved every email. I tracked every timestamp. Documentation isn't aggression, it's insurance. Second, I reduced access. Not just digital access, emotional access. I stopped sharing long-term plans, stopped explaining strategies, stopped asking for approval. If someone uses information to undermine you, you don't give them more information. Third, I defined my loyalty differently. Loyalty is not blind. It is earned and maintained through integrity. I became loyal to my standards, to my team, to the system functioning properly, not to a last name. And here's what surprised me. When I stopped fighting to stay inside that family structure, I started building something healthier. Professional respect, peer trust, mentorship relationships based on performance, not perception. When 22 colonels stood up at my promotion, that wasn't about blood. That was about record. About years of consistent accuracy. About protecting their units when it would have been easier to stay quiet. And here's the part I want you to think about. If you're in a family where one person is always protected, no matter what they do, ask yourself why. If you're always the one told to be the bigger person, ask why that burden never rotates. If your honesty is labeled betrayal, consider what's really being defended. You don't have to expose everything publicly. Not every conflict requires escalation. But you do need internal clarity. Ask yourself, am I protecting truth or am I protecting comfort? Because comfort fades. Truth compounds. You might lose invitations, you might lose access, you might lose approval, but you won't lose self-respect. And self-respect scales. Family can be a source of strength, or it can be a structure built on image management. The difference shows up the moment you refuse to lie. The day I said from today, I have teammates, not family people, thought I was being cold. I wasn't. I was being precise. Blood doesn't define your standard. Your choices do. And if you ever find yourself standing alone because you chose integrity over optics, understand something important. You're not isolated. You're transitioning from inherited hierarchy to earned respect. That transition is uncomfortable, but it's where growth lives. And once you've seen the difference between a family and a power structure, you'll never confuse the two again. The biggest mistake I ever made early in my career wasn't trusting the wrong person. It was reacting to them. When someone manipulates you, they don't just want control over outcomes. They want control over your emotions. They want to see you frustrated, defensive, angry, explaining yourself in long paragraphs, trying to prove you're reasonable. That reaction is fuel. And I gave it to Sloan for years. I argued logic. I brought data. I tried to make her understand that cutting authentication safeguards wasn't strategic, that forging my name wasn't temporary damage control, that manipulating perception wasn't leadership. She didn't misunderstand me. She understood me perfectly. She just needed me emotional. Because emotional people look unstable. Calm people look credible. That's when I learned something that changed everything. You don't defeat manipulation with louder arguments. You defeat it with controlled presence. That's what Grey Rock is. It's not weakness, it's discipline. Grey Rock means you become uninteresting to someone who thrives on reaction. You don't escalate. You don't over-explain. You don't defend yourself in 10 paragraphs. You respond with short, neutral, controlled statements. When Sloan accused me of instability, I didn't argue about feelings. I asked for documentation. When she offered to fix my debt if I resigned, I didn't explode. I signed acknowledgement and let her think she won. When she framed me publicly as going through a difficult time, I didn't counterattack in media. I archived the clip. Grey Rock doesn't mean silence forever. It means you choose timing. Here's what most people don't understand. Manipulators escalate when you stop reacting. At first they'll try harder, sharper comments, public framing, strategic rumors. That's not a sign the strategy failed. That's a sign it's working. Because now they're uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people make mistakes. Let's bring this out of the military context. Maybe your version isn't a lieutenant colonel. Maybe it's a manager who takes credit for your work. A sibling who controls family narrative. A business partner who reframes your objections as negativity. A partner who labels your boundaries as overreacting. If you respond emotionally every time you give them leverage. If you over-explain, you give them content. If you defend yourself publicly, you validate the narrative. Grey Rock sounds simple. It's not. It requires emotional control. Here's how you apply it. First, reduce personal disclosure. Stop sharing long-term plans with someone who competes with you. Stop announcing strategy before execution. Information is power. If someone uses information against you, you don't feed them more. Second, short responses. Instead of "that's not what happened and here's why," say "that's inaccurate." Instead of "you're misunderstanding my intentions," say "I disagree." No sarcasm, no explanation, no emotional tone. Third, document privately. Grey Rock isn't passive. While you appear neutral, you're building structure. Save emails, take notes after meetings, track inconsistencies. When the moment comes, you don't argue from memory, you argue from record. Fourth, don't chase validation. This is the hardest one. You want people to understand you. You want fairness. But when someone is committed to misrepresenting you, explanation becomes a trap. I stopped trying to convince my parents that I was right. I started proving I was accurate. There's a difference. Accuracy doesn't require applause. It requires consistency. Now let's address the risk. Grey Rock is not long-term suppression. If you stay silent forever in a toxic system, you enable it. Grey Rock is a temporary operational strategy. You use it to stabilize yourself. Collect evidence. Avoid emotional traps. Wait for structural opportunity. When the hearing came, I wasn't emotional, I was prepared. That preparation came from months of controlled reaction. And here's something else. Grey Rock protects your credibility. When you're the calm one in the room and the other person escalates, observers notice. You don't need to announce maturity, you demonstrate it. In real life, this might look like your boss criticizes you unfairly in a meeting. You respond. Can you clarify the performance metric you're referencing? Calm, direct. Now the burden shifts. Someone spreads a rumor, you respond. That's incorrect. Then stop. No rant, no social media thread. You don't defend your character with noise. You defend it with consistency, over time. The reason Grey Rock works is simple. Manipulation depends on energy transfer. If you stop supplying energy, the manipulator either escalates recklessly or disengages. Both create exposure. But here's the part people miss. Grey Rock also forces you to regulate yourself. You can't fake calm long-term. You have to build it. That means sleeping properly, thinking before responding, not sending emails while angry, waiting 10 minutes before replying to provocation. It's discipline, and discipline compounds. When I sat in that hospital room with Sloan offering to erase my debt, she expected tears or rage. She got neutrality, and neutrality made her overconfident. Overconfidence made her careless. Carelessness made her recordable. That's not luck. That's strategy. If you're dealing with someone who thrives on control, don't try to outshout them. Outlast them. Outdocument them. Outdiscipline them. And remember this, you don't owe emotional access to someone who uses it as leverage. Calm isn't weakness, it's positioning. And once you learn how to control your reaction, you realize something powerful. You can't always control the narrative, but you can always control your response to it. And that alone shifts the balance of power. If you asked me 10 years ago what power looked like, I would have described a stage. Microphones, applause, titles read out loud, headlines. That's visibility. It's loud, it's immediate. It feels impressive, and it fades fast. Sloan mastered visibility early. She understood lighting, phrasing, timing. She knew how to speak in ways that made people feel inspired without saying anything measurable. She was good at being seen. I was good at being correct. For a long time, that felt like losing. Because visibility gets attention, respect takes time, and time feels slow when you're watching someone else rise faster. Here's the difference I learned the hard way. Visibility is external. Respect is structural. Visibility depends on who's watching. Respect depends on who's working with you. Visibility can be manufactured. Respect has to be earned repeatedly. When Sloan cut authentication safeguards to accelerate her modernization rollout, it increased visibility, faster implementation, bigger headlines, more praise. It also increased risk. When I insisted on keeping the safeguards in place, it slowed everything down. It made me look cautious, conservative, not bold. But safeguards protect structure. Structure outlasts applause. The day 22 colonels stood up at my promotion, it wasn't because I had the most impressive speeches. It was because I had protected their units when shortcuts were tempting. They trusted my decisions, not my branding. If you're building a career or a business or even a reputation inside your own family, you need to decide which one you want. Visibility or respect. You can chase both. But when they conflict, one reveals your priorities. Here are 5 principles I follow now. First, document everything. Not because you expect betrayal, because memory is unreliable. Documentation removes emotion from disputes. When I challenged procurement decisions I didn't rely on, I remember. I relied on timestamps. That's not paranoia. That's professionalism. In your world, that might mean saving agreements in writing, following up conversations with email summaries, keeping your own performance metrics. If it matters, record it. Second, protect the system, not your ego. There were moments when I could have exposed Sloan publicly early. I didn't. Not because I was afraid, because exposure without structure is noise. I waited until the vulnerability wasn't just personal, it was institutional. Protecting the system gave my case weight. Protecting my ego would have made it look petty. Ask yourself this in conflicts. Am I trying to win or am I trying to correct? Winning is emotional, correcting is structural. Third, never cut safety for speed. Shortcuts look efficient until they're audited. If you remove standards to move faster, you create hidden liabilities. That applies outside the military too. Cutting ethical corners for rapid growth. Ignoring red flags in partnerships because the deal is big. Overpromising because you want visibility. Everything deferred eventually surfaces. Fourth, don't trade integrity for access. Access feels powerful. Being invited into the room. Being connected to influential people. But if access requires silence about something wrong, it's not opportunity, it's compromise. I lost access to my family network. I lost introductions. I lost invitations. But I kept credibility. Credibility compounds. Access expires. Fifth patience compounds. Visibility spikes. Respect builds slowly. There were years where I felt invisible compared to Sloan. She was on panels, in articles, quoted in newsletters. I was in logistics review rooms correcting line items. 4 years later, the roles reversed. Not because I chased visibility, because I stayed consistent. Consistency is boring, until it becomes undeniable. Let's make this practical. Maybe you're the quiet one in your family. Maybe your sibling is the charismatic one. Maybe at work, someone else gets recognition while you handle the operational backbone. Here's the truth. Recognition and respect are not the same thing. Recognition is applause. Respect is trust. When something breaks, who do people call? When something needs fixing quietly, who do they rely on? That's respect. And here's something else I learned. You don't need everyone to respect you. You need the right people to. When 22 colonels stood up, that wasn't a popularity contest. That was accumulated trust. Those officers had seen my work under pressure. They had seen me refuse shortcuts. They had seen me stay neutral when politics escalated. That's why they stood. Not because of a speech, because of a pattern. If you want long-term authority in your life, build patterns. Show up consistently. Keep your standards even when no one is watching. Correct errors even when it's inconvenient. Don't chase validation from people committed to misunderstanding you. Chase competence. Competence attracts serious people. Visibility attracts attention. And attention is unstable. The final lesson is this. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to hold power. You need to be the most reliable. When Sloan stood behind that fence watching my promotion ceremony, she wasn't hated. She was irrelevant. And irrelevance is what happens when visibility detaches from integrity. She once told me I didn't have what it takes to stand next to her. She was right about one thing. I wasn't built for her version of power. I was built for mine. If you're in a season where you feel unseen, focus on structure, build skill, build documentation, build discipline. Let other people chase spotlight. You build foundation. Because when spotlight fades, foundation remains. And foundation is what people stand on when everything else shakes.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.